Hello, friends. The 768th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Near Avdiivka on Saturday, the Russian army carried out one of its largest tank offensives, Forbes reports. 36 tanks and 12 infantry fighting vehicles attacked the road from recently captured Tonenki west to Umansky. Telegram channels associated with the Ukrainian armed forces report that 12 tanks and 8 infantry fighting vehicles were knocked out. Forbes believes that the Ukrainian military tracked the movement of the convoy using drones and attacked with artillery, and then with FPV drones. A number of Russian military telegram channels confirm losses in strength and equipment during the attempt to break through to Umansky and write that the situation is complicated, to put it mildly, by not the most competent command, which cares about the result, not the price. And they make it clear that one of the main difficulties of the offensive was dense mining. Also, Russian telegram channels wrote that the Ukrainian armed forces in this area were fiercely resisting and counterattacking. It is worth noting that the situation in the Tonenki area has become more complicated in recent days, since the enemy is bringing into battle not only infantry, but also, as we see, a considerable number of equipment. Today, according to Ukrainian telegram channels, fighting continues along Mira and Centralna streets in the Avdiivka district in Berdychi. To the west of Tonenki, Russian troops are pressing in the direction of Yasnobrodivka. In Yevhenii, the enemy hoisted 2 flags in the western part of the village, as a result of which Russian advance was recorded in an area up to 200 meters wide and to a depth of up to 650 meters. Bild military analyst Julian Rerp writes that near Avdiivka, Russian troops were close to entering operational space. He states that Russian troops have already broken through the Ukrainian defense line in places to the west of Avdiivka in the villages of Berdychi, Semenivka, Orlivka, Tonenki. Fighting is still ongoing for Berdychi and Semenivka, but they are already partially controlled by the Russians, according to Rerp. If Semenivka falls, then it won't be easier for the Russians than before, but they won't have settlements on their way for a long time before Ukrainian resistance arises again in any houses, logistics points, and so on, the analyst believes. In the event of the capture of Berdychi and Semenivka, a territory of 3 to 5 kilometers to Umansky and Novopokrovsky opens up before Russia, which could become operational space for the Russians. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military claims that the Russians have begun to use ground robotic platforms with an AGS-17 automatic grenade launcher near Avdiivka. This happened in Berdychi. The Ukrainian armed forces previously showed how they destroy these Russian vehicles with drones from the air. Russian observers write that such assault vehicles were used at the front for the first time. The Russians claim that the robots were able to suppress the positions of the Ukrainian army by firing grenades at them from a mounted grenade launcher. It is stated that this was an experimental use of ground assault drones on this tracked base. In the Bakhmut sector in the Chasiv Yar area, Russian troops advanced in an area up to 2 kilometers wide and to a depth of 620 meters. The enemy continues to bring up reserves for assault operations with a wider coverage. From the city of Chasiv Yar to enemy positions is about 650 meters. Footage of destroyed enemy equipment also appeared in the western part of Yevhenii. The enemy tried to jump across the river further along the route, but crashed. In recent days, enemy pressure here has dropped significantly. This is due to significant losses during attacks on the positions of the defense forces. At the same time, in Yevhenii, the fighting continues, and taking into account all the factors, sooner or later you will have to leave the village, since advancement at the heights affects the increase in losses in the populated area. The situation is similar with Bogdanivka, who risks ending up in a semi-encirclement. Zelensky, for the first time, made it clear about the possibility of negotiations with Putin before reaching the 1991 borders. According to him, Putin will be ready for dialogue if Ukraine's armed forces reach the borders in 2022. We will not need to occupy all our territories solely by military means. I am sure that when he loses what he captured starting in 22, he will completely lose the confidence of even those countries that still doubt whether to support Ukraine or not. And he will also lose power within his state. Once that happens, he will be ready for dialogue, the president said in an interview with CBS. He noted that to achieve such a result, not only military steps are needed on the part of Ukraine with a sufficient number of Western weapons, but also a complete trade blockade of Russia with the rest of the world. To win means to help Ukraine win economically, to be strong on the battlefield, and to help politically. We will not need to deoccupy all our territories exclusively by military means, Zelensky said. I note that the president has previously invariably stated that the Ukrainian armed forces will not negotiate with Russia until they reach the 1991 borders. Now Zelensky has essentially said that he is ready for negotiations after the return of territories lost after February 2022. Zelensky also said in an interview that Putin does not plan to freeze the war in Ukraine and wants to completely occupy it. This man doesn't want to end the war. He is selling his national idea, the return of the Soviet Union, even more than the Soviet Union, to the Russian Empire. He sells this idea to his society. It is not profitable for him to end this war until he occupies us, said the Ukrainian president. Let me remind you that Zelensky has previously repeatedly stated something completely different, that Putin wants to stop the war as soon as possible in order to get a break. Ukraine is not prepared to defend against another major Russian offensive expected in late May or June, Zelensky said in an interview with CBS News. He says Ukraine's armed forces have now managed to hold off Russia's advance during the worst winter months and stabilize the situation. But he says that it is difficult for the Ukrainian army to fight Russia because its artillery is longer range, and Ukraine has a huge shortage of both artillery and shells. We didn't have ammunition, artillery, shells, a lot of different things, he said, stressing that while his troops have managed to hold off the Russians so far, they are not prepared to defend against another major Russian offensive expected in the coming months. Writes CBS News, usually when they attack with artillery and destroy villages, they always try to occupy them afterwards. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. Therefore, we must prepare, Zelensky said. The president agreed that it would be very difficult to win the war while Putin remains in power. He also again reproached the United States for not providing assistance, and noted that under 80% of the money from this aid remains in the States. Friends, preparing these daily reports has become my full-time job, and I have no other job for obvious reasons. There have been few views on the channel lately, which is why I ask for your help. If you have the opportunity to support me financially, I would be very grateful. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.